All right, well, good afternoon, everyone, and we're doing the webinar today, as Michael said, from Wayne State University in Detroit. I'm glad we have folks listening in from all over the state. My work here at the Institute is varied, and as Michael said, one of my projects is the Emergency Preparedness Grant, and we get funding through the Michigan Department of Community Health and the Centers for Disease Control to sponsor this training. There are two parts of this training, basically. One is for people with disabilities, their family members, and caregivers. And that is for you to become prepared in the event of a disaster and emergency in your community. The other training I do as part of this grant is with first responders and volunteers. These are people who come to you in an emergency or a disaster to help you out. And what I do with them is I do disability awareness training, letting them become aware of the special needs of people with disabilities, like helping animals, medication, how to help them evacuate successfully, communicating, and just various things that they need to know to be more effective when working with people with disabilities in a disaster. And I actually did just that training last night with the Salvation Army. So today what you're going to be getting is the Preparing for an Emergency training, and we're going to talk about the Safe Place Toolkit as well. At the end of my PowerPoint, I'm going to show you a picture of the Safe Place Toolkit. Some of you have requested the toolkit. For those of you who have not, I will tell you how to get it, okay? And we're going to put this on our website too. But you can contact us at the Developmental Disabilities Institute. You can email me at e.jenks, you see my email is there on the screen, at wayne.edu. You need to let me know your name and your address so we can mail you out a Safe Place Toolkit. All right, and again, I'm going to show you what that is. It's basically two forms that you fill out. It's got emergency information on it, any medications you might take, your physicians, who your direct care workers are, if you have a guide dog, and then there's, like I said, two versions of this. One is a large version that sits in a plastic pouch and is to be in plain view in case a first responder needs to come into your home. And the other is a smaller version of the same thing. You carry it in your wallet or your purse so that if something were to happen, you would have a small emergency plan on you at all times. All right, and so again, we're going to look at a picture of that. If y'all are interested in that, it did say on the initial flyer, you know, to contact us prior to the webinar today, and we could have mailed it to you so you would have had it. But for folks that didn't do that, don't worry about it. You can contact us now. I'm going to give you a couple of ways you can contact us, but probably the best way is through my email. And I'll give you Anita's email, and I'll also give you our regular mailing address if you want to request via the mail. A little bit about where we work. It's the Developmental Disabilities Institute at Wayne State. We're one of the Michigan University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities. There are 63 national and international centers for educational excellence in developmental disabilities across the world. Our main mission is to contribute to the development of inclusive communities and quality of life of people with disabilities and their families through culturally sensitive statewide programs of interdisciplinary education, community support and services, research, and dissemination of information. So we do a lot of training. Agencies contact us and request training. We do this type of training with different people in the community. And we have various activities that help us build inclusive communities for people with disabilities and their family members. We're a resource to you as well, and there's the website address. We have a wonderful website, lots of information on it you might find very useful. It tells you all about our upcoming events, what we're doing at the Institute, and of course it showcases our possibilities DVDs, which are stories of people living fully inclusive, high quality of lives in the community throughout their lifespan. So we invite you to visit that on our website and view some of those. Well, today we're going to talk about what is an emergency and getting ready for an emergency. Okay, so emergencies usually are defined as when we have to involve, you know, health personnel, EMS, fire and police in something that has happened. Perhaps if you have a fire in your home, you need to get out of your home as quickly as possible and then go to a phone and call for 911. Don't call from your house, right? Because you need to get out as soon as possible if there's a fire. Ambulance, same thing. If you have a family member who's having a medical emergency, heart attack, stroke, you call for the ambulance immediately. Now, in this part of the training, I always like to tell folks too, right? If you cut your finger and it's not bleeding a lot, you're not losing a lot of blood, and you can put a Band-Aid on it or wrap it tightly and drive to an emergency room, that means we don't call for the ambulance, okay? Ambulances are used specifically when it's a life-threatening emergency. Well, in Michigan, we have different emergencies and weather disasters, and these are probably our most prominent, right? The thunderstorms that we get, especially in the fall and in the spring, and our snowstorms in the winter, which we had a very long winter this year, and of course we had so much snow, and power lines came down quite frequently, didn't they, and tree branches and that sort of thing, and that creates a lot of problems for us in our homes as well as work. We had a couple days here at Wayne State. They closed the university because of the hazardous weather. Probably one of our more famous weather disasters, right, are tornadoes. And we're in tornado season right now, which usually begins on March the 1st and ends on October the 1st. So we're right in the middle of a very active weather time. Tornadoes do happen in Michigan. Tornadoes are graded F1 through F5. And for those of you Twister fans who've seen that movie, they talked about the F5 movie. F5 tornadoes quite often in that movie. We get 1, 2s, and 3s in Michigan. A 1 can be very severe as well. Branches, gigantic trees come down. They can be very hazardous to us. People can get hurt here, and we do often sustain a lot of damage to our homes and lose our power. Now, we do have floods as well in Michigan. We often don't get the flash floods, although yesterday when those torrential rains came down, I was listening to the weather reports. I was on my way to a training in Southfield, and they were saying that there were specific roads that were being closed due to rapidly rising water. So yes, floods do play a role in emergencies and disasters in our lives here as well. We don't often get those real fast rising waters like they do in the south of the country, or even on the East Coast during a hurricane, but we do get flooding, and we have to be cognizant of that and know what to do when it happens. Most of the time, when we have a disaster like a bad snowstorm or tornado, we get an interruption in our electricity. And of course, our electricity and furnaces, our refrigerators, sometimes our stove, if we have an electric stove, they will be useless to us if we lose our electricity. And so there's a lot of problems that are created. You can't see very well. Our homes can become rather dangerous. We can trip on things. Our homes can become very cold in the winter. We might have to leave our home because of that. We can't always cook. We sometimes lose our hot water. So there's many problems related to us losing our electrical power. And of course, unfortunately, in Michigan, that happens to us quite frequently. So we're going to talk about how we can prepare for these types of emergencies, as well as pandemic and epidemics that can occur with illnesses in our state. Because this is another type of disaster that can happen, is that there was for instance, there was a N1H1 virus that was going through Michigan this year, and they were specifically concerned about little ones and elderly people who are very susceptible to these illnesses when they are running, through our communities. And of course, since we are, in school together or working together or as families living in the same place, we're sharing germs very easily. So people can get sick And for elderly people and people who have frail health or chronic health conditions or very young babies and children, pandemic flus and illnesses can be a threat to their existence. Another thing that happens in our state is we have trucks that go through and trains that have hazardous waste on them. And occasionally, unfortunately, one of them will derail, or as we had happened a year ago in southwest Detroit, a truck hit a bridge abutment and was loaded down with a hazardous chemical, which then was released onto the ground in the freeway. So there can be a hazardous situation created by chemical spills and from gas being released into the environment. And we have to know how to handle those specific types of disasters too. And a little bit later in the training, I'm going to show you a DVD, and it's going to address when you have to shelter in your home, because sometimes it's better to stay in your house versus leaving your home in an emergency, especially if there's, noxious gases in the area. It's better to seal off your home and stay inside versus leaving. So we're going to talk about when do you stay and when do you go. Let's talk about how we're going to get prepared for an emergency, okay? Well, we have to find out what the emergency might be first, and we hear that in a variety of ways, right? On the news, radio, our neighbors, our friends, and we have to find out what the emergency is. If it's going to be a snowstorm, how bad is the snowstorm going to be? How much snow are we going to have? Are they requesting that we stay parked off the street so they can clean roads? Are the weather conditions very, very likely that we'll have a very bad thunderstorm or a tornado? So we have to be aware of what's going on. Now, if you were a live audience, I would ask you this question and you'd be able to weigh in, but I want you to kind of answer this question to yourself right now is, what's the difference between a watch or a warning during a tornado or a severe thunderstorm? Okay, sometimes we get a little confusion around this, and a watch is just that, when they're watching out for a tornado or a severe thunderstorm. It is not there yet, okay? That's a watch, but they're saying that the weather conditions are conducive to having a bad storm that day or that night. A warning means that a storm spotter or on a Doppler radar system, they have spotted tornadic activities, all right? It doesn't always mean that a tornado will touch down, but it means that there are tornado clouds in the area. Warning, take cover. Get kids from the outside and bring them in, and your pets. Go to a closet in your home if you don't have a basement, but the best place to go is your basement. If you have one, if you don't have one, if you have an innermost closet in your home, under staircases, all right? Most medical emergencies in a tornado, 90% of them are related to flying debris. So you want to protect your head, you want to get in, and you want to get under some cover. That is the best thing to do. Don't worry about closing your windows, okay? They used to say run around the house, opening your windows. Going around the house, opening certain windows in your house. They now say don't worry about that. It doesn't really make any difference if a tornado hits your house, if it's going to save more of the house or not by opening windows. Best thing to do is just take cover quickly. Well, let's go on now and say, how would we learn about an emergency? And I know I just talked a little bit about that earlier, but I didn't mention the reverse 911 system. You see that there's a phone on this slide. Some communities, and you can find this out by calling your local fire department or police department, find out if your community has what they call a reverse 911 emergency warning system. Now, if you think about this, when you dial 911, you're dialing your phone or your cell phone, and you're reaching out to an emergency dispatcher to report an emergency. How a reverse system works is they call you. Okay, they call you, the first responders in the area, or they're calling you. It could be the fire department, police, and saying, there's an issue in the neighborhood in your particular geographic location, you may want to take cover right now, or sometimes they can warn you if dangerous individuals, you know, are in the area, and they will call you if there's a weather emergency, and they'll tell you, you know, like how should you evacuate, or should you stay, or just take cover in a bad storm. So that's one way we can learn about an emergency, but you have to check because it's not active in every community that we live in. And we did mention listening to the radio, although I think less and less people listen to the radio, and more people are on their own individual communication devices, and you know, listening to their own, to their computers, their iPads, things like that, their telephones. We do still learn about emergencies through the television. Sometimes they run the little ticker tape on the bottom of the screen during regular programming, or sometimes they interrupt programming, right, to say, hi, this is ABC News. We've spotted a tornado in the Brighton area. Everyone who lives in the Livingston County area, please take cover. We expect this storm to go through Oakland County at this time, and we expect this storm to go through Macomb County at this time. So that's a great way to learn about what's going on if you have your television on. Sometimes our neighbors tell us. They can knock on the door and mention, you know, something's going on. You might read about something in the news as well. Sometimes emergencies can make us feel stressed out because they can be scary, you know, and especially to young children when sirens are going off, or people with disabilities who may have some autistic tendencies. The loud noises are very stressful to us. Also, sometimes it can trigger memories of some time that was scary for us, and it can bring us some stress. And I remember as a child, I experienced a tornado. And, you know, for years after that, when I would go out and see the clouds rolling or hear about the possibility of bad weather that day, it would make me a little bit nervous for many, many years. So sometimes these things that have happened to us in our life bring back bad memories and can add to our stress level. One way to reduce stress, though, is to be prepared. And one of the things I learned from this grant was I did not have a family plan. I have a son, Robert, who has developmental and intellectual disabilities, and I didn't have a formal emergency plan for him. So when I started learning more about disasters and how to best handle them, I got a Safe Place Toolkit and filled it out, and keep one in my home, and Robert carries one in his backpack. So being prepared is really key, so that we can take away some of the stress and know that we're ready for whatever happens. And that can mean, you know, having enough medication. It can mean having battery-operated radios with batteries that are, you know, actually working. So we need to check those, and we'll talk more about that in the webinar. It might mean having like a first aid kit. But we're gonna learn more about what can go in our disaster kit as we go through this presentation. So I advise everybody to not only do the Safe Place Toolkit, okay, that you can write to me and get a copy of, but I also advise everyone to put together a simple toolkit. And you should have some medication in there if you take medication, insulin if you're diabetic. You should have a battery-operated radio. You should have fresh batteries. Replace them every year, okay? Check your flashlights. You should have some canned foods. They don't go bad for a very long time. Dehydrated foods. You should have enough water as well. All right, so they usually say a half a gallon of water per day per person. Okay, so if you have 4 people in your family, you need 2 gallons of water for each day. And they say, emergency specialists say you should have enough for 3 days. So let's do the math. If we need 2 gallons times that 3 days, you actually need 6 gallons of water, enough for a family of 4. And that would mean you wouldn't have any left over to cook with and do things with, okay? So that would be a minimum amount, 6 gallons. Well, we talked about all of this, didn't we? A radio, you need a battery, you need some flashlights. And folks, for those of you that have family members that like to sneak down and take the flashlight flashlight out, and then maybe it doesn't quite make its way back to the emergency kit, so that one day, right, the storm comes and you don't have light, but you think, oh yeah, I'm going down to the box and I'm going to get the flashlight out. And you get the flashlight out and either the batteries are gone, the batteries are dead, or it happened, what used to happen at my house most often, my sons would take the flashlight and you couldn't find the flashlight. My advice is make an emergency kit and keep it somewhere. Let the adults know in your family where it is and your direct care workers. But I definitely, my children, I did not let them know because oftentimes things would disappear. You need to make sure you have extra medicine. And sometimes this can be very difficult to do because our prescriptions are written in a way that it's very difficult for the pharmacist to give us any extra pills. I did a couple of different things. With my sons, I just held back like once a month, one, I'm blanking on the word I want to use, but like one-time dosage is what I'm trying to say. I would hold back one dose until I had enough for 3 days. I've heard other people tell me, Elizabeth, I went to my doctor and I just told them I needed some extras. Or I've heard other people say I had to pay for it out of pocket because my insurance is so, they monitor it so tightly that I can't, I just can't get any extra pills without paying for them out of pocket. So this can be a problem, and I know that when I say you should have the extra medicine on hand, I know that it can be challenging, but your doctor would probably be willing to work with you, or your pharmacist, especially if you let them know that you're putting this into an emergency kit. Okay, so for instance, my son takes medicine for his epilepsy, so I always make sure I have extra. I also let his care providers know if you have to evacuate the house, grab his medicine. Everybody knows Rob needs his medicine. You can't leave the house without it. Grab whatever is in there and take it. Oh, look at this. We have the Safe Place Toolkit. This is a picture of it right here. You can see that your medical information goes on there, your emergency contacts, your direct care staff. It asks if you live by yourself or with your family, and if you have roommates, who they are. It gets at your medical information, medications, dosages, frequencies. And I think this is a really neat addition to our emergency plan that many emergency plans don't have, is the assistive technology section. Do you use a communication device? Do you use medical equipment? Do you have an assistive animal? That information all needs to go on this emergency plan. Have you had recent surgeries? Do you have any extra health issues that a first responder needs to know? Or if you're being evacuated someplace, do they need to know? So this is the toolkit right here. The other way to obtain this, if you didn't already get one in the mail, is you can go to our website, which was up on the first slide, the ddi.wayne.edu, and we have a page on our website that's the Emergency Preparedness Planning Grant page. If you go there, this is on that page. You can click a link and print it out. All right, and so I also tell people that have one, if you make a mistake, don't worry about it. You can go to the website and download it. We have to decide, when do I leave my home in an emergency or when do I stay? Well, oftentimes the first responders, or the news media will tell us if it's a situation if we should stay or go. And what types of situations do you think would mean we have to leave our home? Like, would we want to leave our home in a tornado or a severe thunderstorm? Probably not, right? We want to stay in then because, remember, it's the high winds and the hail and the flying debris that can be harmful to us. There's a hazardous waste spill, and it could cause, a fire in the area. In this case, you might want to go, and you might have a first responder come to your home and say, there is a possibility that, you know, a fire could develop in your neighborhood, travel very quickly, you need to leave and go to a shelter. Okay, and these are some examples of shelters. There are churches, there are apartments that are designated shelters, and the Salvation Army and the American Red Cross designate the shelters in our community. Oftentimes, what they have done a really good job of in the last 5 years is coming up with shelters where people with disabilities can get into. They're accessible. Coming up with shelters where helping animals can be kept, okay? So they've gotten better at keeping people with disabilities comfortable and in an accessible place until we can be reunited with our family and friends. Well, who needs to know if you leave your house? Of course, your family, your direct care worker if they're not with you, or your friends. So always leave a note, all right? If you have to leave your home, you want to leave a note in an easy place, a very easy spot for people to see, so that they know you've gone to the shelter, that you are at whatever school or church, or that you're in the community but you are safe, okay? And the Safe Place Toolkit also has spots where, remember on that sheet where you could write who your family is, your next of kin that needs to be contacted, or direct care workers that need to be contacted, so they're not worried for you. So we talked about also, like, if you go, leave your home, these are some places you might go to. It might be your local school. It could be a community center. There are shelters. I mean, I was amazed when I started my work with this grant. I, go to a lot of meetings with emergency preparedness organizations like the Salvation Army, American Red Cross, Homeland Security, and I was just amazed at the network of shelters that are in all of our communities all across the state. So we really have done a nice job here in Michigan of having, multiple dwellings that can house multiple people with different needs. So I know it can be scary sometimes if you have a visual impairment or physical disability and someone is saying, well, you need to go to this school or you need to go to a shelter. And you might be thinking, well, can I use my chair there? What about my dog? I'm leaving my surroundings where I know where everything is. How am I going to function in this new environment? They've done, I think, a very good job of ensuring that the shelters can accommodate most people fairly comfortably now. One thing I do tell people, though, if you use a power chair and you have access to a manual chair, it's often better just to take the manual chair because it's just easier to transport and use, and you don't have to worry about a backup battery. If you leave, take a little bag that you've already pre-packed and kept in a place, right? A safe place with your medicine, your food, a little bit of water, your clothes, and your medical information in your bag. Who will come into my home or my apartment if there is an emergency? Who will knock on the door? Who will come to me? Well, it could be the police. These are people we call first responders because they are the first ones on the scene in an emergency. The firemen, the emergency medical personnel, okay, they get dispatched, ambulance people, these are all first responders. One thing I want you to know is that people that are going to come to you in an emergency will either have on a uniform or some type of identification saying what organization they're with, or they will have some type of name badge, okay? So you know they're a trustworthy and reliable person to help you out. What about your pet? Well, we have to make a distinction, don't we, between pets and helping animals. Unfortunately, excuse me, excuse me, all my allergies are acting up today. Unfortunately, our pets have to get left behind, which would include my puppy, Ginger, because even though my son has a disability, she's not a trained helper animal, and I need to leave room in the shelters for people who really have trained helping animals that help them on a day-to-day basis live their lives. Wouldn't be fair for me to bring my pet Ginger because I might be keeping the spot out for some of the other folks out there who actually have helping animals that are critical to helping them live. So here's the thing to remember about your pet. You can always fill a bathtub with water, all right? I would advise people to fill a bathtub up with some cold water, leave extra bowls around the house, and some food. And you would be surprised, dogs are a little bit like people in that we can live a long time with just the water, okay? They have to have the water. The food isn't as critical. Like, they can't live, the food isn't quite as critical as the water is. Dogs, like people, can live a long time with just a water source. So leave that, pre-feed your fish, and you will more than likely have to leave them behind. If you have a helping animal, have a record handy in your emergency bag of their license and all of their immunizations, because some shelters will want to have evidence of that so that they can keep your pet with you, so they know they're not a problem for other people who would be at the shelter with you. So getting ready for an emergency is really critically important so that we are not stressed out during an emergency, so that we can be safer in an emergency. And I will tell you, an emergency is something you think will never happen to you, right? But because of where we live, it's a very high likelihood you'll experience a severe thunderstorm, a winter storm, and you may lose your power, a tornado. We do have fires in Michigan, especially for those of you that live in rural areas up north where we have a lot of forests, or on the west side of the state. We actually do get forest fires occasionally, and areas do have to be evacuated. We think about those states like California, with the big forest fires and things where it's a real imminent threat to people in their community, but it does happen in Michigan as well. So there's a variety of things that can happen. We can have bad household accidents where we need to call for emergency personnel. So the best thing to do, again, is to be prepared. And these are some places you can go for more information. DoOneThing.org is a wonderful website. They do a great job, and the whole idea behind this is you do one thing a month. So it's not so overwhelming, okay? Like today, you don't have to leave and go out and buy all the water, all the food, get the kids ready, get all the medicine, do everything. The premise on Do One Thing, you go on there, and every month you do one thing. And then once a year they'll ask you, did you replenish your batteries? Did you check and make sure that your matches are still there? And, do you have waterproof matches? Anyway, it's just a really nice, very manageable tool to use online. FEMA has a lot of information and a lot about how they can assist people with disabilities in a disaster and emergency. Salvation Army, they do wonderful work in our communities. They have highly trained volunteers that come to your home. If you were to have a fire in your home and you had to go to a hotel, they provide hotels until you can get on your feet again. They bring you clothes. It's just, I can't say enough about this organization. Them, along with the American Red Cross, hold all the maps to all the various shelters in the community. You can actually get a hold of them, visit their website, and find out where your local shelters are. American Red Cross, another fine organization. They do a lot of training with volunteers to help prepare them. That you've seen the name. They go into places all over the world if there's a disaster, tsunami, earthquake, whatever it is, and they do tremendous work here in our country. This is a guide. Also, it's a document if you want to read. It's ready.gov/individuals access functional needs, and then samhsa.gov. DTAC also has a lot of guides and information about how they'll support people with disabilities in an emergency. So these are some various ways that you can prepare. Okay, I'd like to show you a DVD, parts of a DVD right now. Okay, just give me a moment here. We're not going to see the whole thing, but we're going to do the introduction. We're going to deal with water, having a disaster plan, and we'll probably do the food as well. So we won't be seeing the whole thing, but we'll be looking at about 20 minutes of it. Looks like it's loading right now.
Being prepared when disaster strikes may mean the difference between life and death for yourself and your family. Since September 11th, the threat of terrorism in America has become a reality. Almost every day there are reports of terrorism throughout the world. The threat of chemical, biological, and nuclear terrorism has come to our shores. Chemical spills, nuclear, industrial, and transportation accidents also can affect our daily lives. Global pandemics can occur naturally through viruses or through bioterrorism attacks. Natural disasters include solar storms and weather-related events such as hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, floods, winter storms, severe drought, and wildland fires. Widespread power outages can occur from excessive demand on electric utilities during prolonged high temperatures. The information contained in this video is intended to help you make important decisions which may affect your welfare and possibly even your survival in the event of an emergency. Solar weather can have a direct impact on our daily lives. Intense solar flares are a potential danger to astronauts in space and passengers in high. Many vital aspects of our daily lives can be disrupted by a variety of natural or man-made disasters. Our supply of drinking water, for example, could be interrupted for a few hours by a water main break, or for days or weeks in the event of a hurricane, earthquake, or prolonged power outage. We can live for a few weeks without food, but only a few days without water. Since a contaminated water supply can result from many different causes, obtaining safe drinking water is a very high priority in emergency situations. Water sources such as lakes, rivers, and streams may look clean, but probably contain microorganisms that can make you sick. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency reports that 90% of the world's fresh water supply is contaminated. In times of emergency, even tap water can be unsafe to drink. Listen to your local radio station to find out if there are any problems with your water filtration plant. If the plant experiences a prolonged power outage, it may be unable to maintain normal safety standards for the water supply. Sources of emergency drinking water include rain, clean snow, lakes, and rivers. You can also drain the water from your home water heater, but you may want to filter it before using it, since it could contain some sediment. Anytime that you're uncertain of the purity of your water, be sure to treat it before you drink it. If the water you're planning to use looks cloudy, the first step in treating it should be to pour it through a coffee filter or a piece of cloth to remove any solid particles. Never try to treat water that smells of petroleum. One method of obtaining safe water is through the use of high-quality camping water filter pumps. A filter which you may have on your kitchen faucet was made to...
Excuse me, everybody. It's been brought to my attention by Michael that you are not seeing the DVD. So I don't see the value. I apologize. We don't understand. We tried a couple of different things, but I apologize about that. You know, I guess, you know, I don't want you to have to just listen to somebody narrating it. It's much more effective, obviously, if you can see the DVD. Mostly, though, in the DVD, they discuss, you know, the water, how much water you need. You can drink the water from your hot water tank. You need to filter that first, obviously. Don't keep your water in plastic gallons in a very hot place with sunlight on it. It's better to keep it in a cool place, like a closet or in a basement. It will last longer that way. You should never drink water out of bottles, plastic bottles that have been heated for a long time, okay, because the carcinogens can break down in the plastics and be in the water. So that's kind of what the DVD talked about. The DVD also gets at the food issue, and you know, you can keep foods like Campbell's soup, tuna fish, and things like that for a couple of years usually, and you just need to make sure that in your toolkit that you have a manual can opener. You can eat those foods without heating them up. I know they're not as good, but you can eat them in an emergency. You can eat those without heating them up, and it will not harm you. Always make sure that the cans you keep in your pantry are not dinged, dented, punctured in any way, okay? The cans have to be, you know, solid, no dings, no puncture marks on them. Keep them in your emergency toolkit. The DVD really goes on and on about the toolkit, and you can get really fancy. I mean, you can spend hundreds of dollars on water purification systems, freeze-dried foods, you know, fancy radios, and you know, you can just get it, you can spend a lot, all right, but you don't have to. I've talked to a lot of people in the disaster and emergency response fields, and they say, listen, just if you get a box, okay, and you get that water in there, you get some canned foods. If you can afford to go to some of the camping stores, or you know, stores where they have you know, freeze-dried food, that's great because it tastes pretty good, it's pretty nutritious, it doesn't cost a lot. Throw a little in there, throw some plastic dishes in there, throw some disposable utensils in that kit, throw some garbage bags in there, and make sure you have your personal care products. If you have, you know, your personal care products, a clean and brand new toothbrush, some soap, for people who need toileting products, those should be in there as well. Matches that are waterproof, or throw some matches in a baggie and seal the baggie, okay? That's the most important things. A flashlight. An old-fashioned radio that you can pick up at a garage sale now for a couple of bucks. Throw some batteries in it. And then every 6 months, go on, check your box, make sure things are still in there, and throw some new batteries in. Recycle your batteries, okay? So you always have batteries. And really, if you think back to the emergencies you've really experienced most in your life, right? These are the ones where the power goes out. And so if you have those flashlights, you can get around safely in your home. If you have a fireplace and you've lost your heat, you can light your fireplace. Gas will work. So if you have a gas stove, it'll still work. A gas fireplace will still work. It will not give off the heat in the way that a wood burning stove will, but it will keep you at least warm, and you can huddle near it. If it's very cold in your home and you can't warm up, and you have children or elders or people with chronic health conditions, you may have to leave your home in that case. It's not a safe environment. Contact Salvation Army and see if they can assist you in getting to a warm place, or contact family and friends where you can stay for a while. I guess that's pretty much what I want you to take away from the DVD is, you know, have water, have food in a safe place, and make sure you have a little kit. And make sure in that kit you have an extra change of clothes and some rubber gloves, if I didn't say it earlier. Because rubber gloves, in case there's contaminated water or anything, you don't ever want to just go into water in your basement, because there can be dirtiness in it and contamination. So you always want to have rubber boots on and gloves, okay? You don't want to touch it with just your hands. That would be in the case of a flood and rising waters. So pretty much that would be the takeaway from the DVD is have a prepared, have a little kit. You don't need to spend a lot of money on it, but it'll help you feel a little better just knowing that you're prepared for an emergency. And remember, I told you sometimes you might have to leave your home in a disaster and go to a shelter, or sometimes you might have to shelter in place. And that would mean, you know, sealing off doors, you know, putting towels underneath your doors, and staying in your home until they tell you that it's safe for you to come out, for whatever reason that might be. I'm sorry we couldn't show the DVD today. I did talk to you a little bit about the Safe Place Toolkit and how you can get that, and you can go visit our website, wayne.edu, to get more information about that. I'd like to take any questions right now from the audience, if you have any questions for me. And I'd also like to tell you I can come to your organization and do this training in person. All right, this is a statewide grant, so if you give me enough notice and I have an audience of at least 10 people, I can come to you for free and do this training in person. And again, you can contact me at that email address that's up on the screen. Questions out there for anyone? I know we had about 60 participants scheduled, so please, any questions you would have?
If anybody has questions, you can type them into the chat box on the bottom right panel of the webinar screen, and Elizabeth can answer them for you. Did have one comment, Elizabeth,
Yes.
to consider earthquakes in other parts of the countries, rather. And I know we had a little bit of those tremors here in Michigan in the last couple of years.
Yes, Michigan is on a fault line. We don't have as active as fault line as they do through Nevada and California. When you actually want to experience those little tremors, because that releases the pressure off the tectonic plates, which creates the likelihood of not having the big quakes. When the pressure keeps building, that's when we experience a larger scale earthquake. And just like tornadoes, they grade them in numbers, 1 through 10. So 10 being the worst kind of earthquake, 1 being those mild tremors that you experience. And so it's good that we get those little ones. We have them every couple of years, and you might just kind of be walking or thinking, oh, that's weird, and then you'll hear on the news there was a small little quake felt. So that's actually a good thing. I was in Colorado a couple years ago, and I was at a TASH conference, and I kept feeling kind of like the building shaking a little bit, and my podium, and people, I looked around in the audience, I was presenting, and people were kind of getting a little like, it was like, oh, they're all feeling it too. And at first I thought it was construction, and then somebody said, no, this is Denver. We do get these little quakes like this, and we're experiencing some small ones today. And it's just a little, especially if you're from Michigan and you're not used to it, it's kind of a little unsettling. Any other questions or comments today?
Yes, one comment was, I've heard that it's recommended to have more than a 72-hour kit. Is that something you've learned about?
It used to be 48 hours. It used to be 48 hours is what they used to tell us. But after, some of the national emergencies we've had where it's been difficult for emergency responders to get to families and to get to people, they've said the 3-day window is pretty much the best way to go. If you have and you want to do 4 days of water, I don't think that could hurt anything. If you want to have extra food, I think it would always be good to be prepared for additional time. But what they've learned from these last disasters is it's going to take at least 3 days for the emergency response team sometimes to get to you, as we saw in the hurricane/snowstorm that hit New Jersey a few years ago, where just they couldn't get to people, or even Katrina 5 years ago. It just sometimes can take a while for response teams to get to us. So it's good to be prepared, and if you have extra days, that's even better. Any other questions or comments today?
Nicole had a question. She says, I'm from Nebraska. How do I find out if someone in my state could do a similar presentation for young adults and their families?
I would go online and go to some of these national, emergency preparedness websites. I'd put in there Nebraska and see what's going on in your state. And by the national websites, I mean like FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Association. Homeland Security has each state, so when you visit their website, you can put in your state and it'll tell you what's going on. I'd also be happy to do a little digging around for you, because there's a national organization as well through the UCIDS, the University Centers for Educational Excellence, and we have emergency special interest group around emergency preparedness, and I can see if the University of Nebraska is doing anything as well, if you'd like me to do that. Any other questions today?
Nicole says she would appreciate you taking the time.
Okay, then Nicole, please send me an email, okay? So I'll have your email address, and I'll do that for you. I just made myself a note. I also wanted to say there's some great stuff out there for little children. You can't start preparing your children soon enough. Sesame Street put out a wonderful little guide for kids, and there's a Spanish version as well. You should know your name, you should know your phone number, you should know your parents' phone numbers and things like that. And they have a Spanish version and they have an English version. And I'm looking at this right now. So if you put in Sesame Street, getting ready, it's called Ready Kids. You can look at what they've got put together there for really young children. And it's on sesamestreet.org/ready. sesamestreet.org/ready. So if you go to that website, they have the Let's Get Ready Toolkit for very young children. Very cute, done with Sesame Street characters. For teens, there's the BeSafeTheMovie.com, BeSafeTheMovie.com. And it's all about how teens can interact in an appropriate way with police enforcement, and how they can stay, so that there's not any problems. It says learning how they can follow instructions from the police, disclosing a disability to officers, learning what laws everyone must follow. So this is the Be Safe the Movie, and it's really directed at teens. So there's some good things out there. There's also something called the Ready, Set, Prepare, a Disaster Preparedness Activity book. And I'm going to put this on the website too. And it's a fun activity book that talks about hurricanes and floods and disasters, and they do it in a way it's educational, and it's meant to prepare young people in the event of a disaster. And it's put out by FEMA, the American Red Cross as well. And you can get that through FEMA and the American Red Cross and their website. So we're going to get that up on the our website here at Wayne State for you. So these are 3 tools that be great at introducing being prepared for an emergency to young children and teens. Okay, because you can't start too soon. So I do apologize for the DVD. We're probably going to wrap up a little early because we didn't show that today. Again, if you like the Safe Place Toolkit, and I hope you all get one, we will mail it out to you. You get a plastic pouch, you get a magnet, so you can stick that on something so that when a first responder comes into your home or apartment, they see your plan, okay, and they know your special needs. If you have multiple people living in your home, make copies and make sure they're all in there. You can also staple a picture or tape a picture to the disaster emergency plan, the Safe Place Toolkit, and that's especially helpful if people are nonverbal, because they can't say, well, I'm, Rob Jenks. So the picture is there to guide the first responder if there's not someone there to support the person. We encourage direct care workers to stay with the individual they support until family or friends can be there. And that means sometimes you have to have a backup plan so that, your family's taken care of, or you can bring the individual with you and leave a note saying where the person is for family and friends that would come in and be worried. Okay, one last round. Any other questions before we sign off today?
There's no more questions.
Okay, Michael has a brief little evaluation. We'd like to know how we do. Please take a few moments to complete it and send it in to me. Again, I apologize about the DVD. We'll get to the bottom of that. But I will put all the resources that I mentioned today on the website. And Nicole, I'll look for you for the Nebraska to see if Nebraska University or state has some training that would be available in the area. So thank you very much.